The moment my mother's number flashed across my phone screen, I knew my carefully constructed world was about to crack. 20 years of silence, and she chooses to call on the day of the Industry Excellence Awards. Perfect timing, as always. I'm Sylvia, and I've spent the last 2 decades building something from nothing. My office, perched on the 32nd floor of downtown Manhattan, is a daily reminder of how far I've come from that terrified 18-year-old girl, pregnant with twins and abandoned by the one person who should have stood by her side. "Ms. Lawson, your speech is ready for review," Claire said, poking her head through my office door. Her usual cheerful expression faltered when she saw my face. "Everything okay?" I declined the call and placed my phone face down. "Just ghosts, Claire. Nothing I can't handle." "The event starts in 3 hours. Jonathan's already there, supervising the setup." Claire hesitated. "And your twins called. They're surprising you by coming to the ceremony." A smile broke through my tension. Ethan and Cora, my unexpected blessings, now freshmen in college. They weren't supposed to make it tonight. Some excuse about midterms. "Those sneaky little—" My phone buzzed again. Same number. "Take it," Claire urged. "I'll hold your calls for the next 15 minutes. After she left, I stared at the phone until it stopped buzzing. 3 missed calls. Then a text. "We need to talk. I'm in the lobby." My hand started shaking. The lobby. She was here. I grabbed my blazer and headed for the elevator, my heels clicking against the marble floors with military precision. The security guard nodded as I passed, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing through the possibilities. Why now? What could she possibly want? The lobby was crowded with the usual afternoon rush, but I spotted her immediately. Roslyn, I refused to call her mom, looked exactly like I remembered, just with more expensive clothes and grayer hair. She was studying the building directory with that familiar, entitled expression. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. She turned, a practiced smile spreading across her face. "Sylvia, darling, look at you. So successful." She moved to embrace me, but I stepped back. 20 years, Roslyn. 20 years of nothing, and now you show up unannounced. Can't a mother be proud of her daughter? She glanced around the lobby. "Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private. Your office, maybe." "There's nothing to discuss. I have an important event tonight." "Yes, the Industry Excellence Awards. I read about it." Her smile turned calculating. "That's quite an achievement. Your company's grown impressively." A chill ran down my spine. She'd been keeping tabs on me. "What do you want?" "Can't this wait until we're somewhere private?" "No. Say what you came to say." She sighed dramatically. "Fine. I've had some financial setbacks recently, and I thought, given your success, you might want to help family." I actually laughed. "Family? You lost the right to call yourself that when you walked out on your pregnant teenage daughter." "I raised you for 18 years, she countered, her voice hardening. "I think that earns me some consideration. Besides, I have documentation of my investments in your early years. It would be a shame if questions arose about the origins of your startup capital." My blood ran cold. She was threatening me. Today of all days. "Security," I called out, maintaining eye contact with her. "Please escort this woman out." "You can't avoid this conversation forever, Sylvia," she said as 2 guards approached. "I'm staying at the Marriott. You have until tomorrow to reconsider." I watched them lead her away, my perfectly planned day now in shambles. My phone buzzed, a text from Cora. "Just landed, can't wait to surprise you tonight." The irony wasn't lost on me. One daughter eager to celebrate my success, while my own mother arrived to extort me for it. Back in my office, Claire was waiting with concern etched on her face. "That bad?" "Worse," I replied, sinking into my chair. "She wants money, and she's not above blackmail to get it." "Should we call Jonathan? Postpone the ceremony?" I thought about my twins, flying in to surprise me. About the years I'd spent building this company, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices. About the little girl, who once desperately wanted her mother's approval. No, I said, straightening my spine. She doesn't get to ruin this too. But Claire, first thing tomorrow, call our lawyers. If Roslyn wants a fight, she's going to learn exactly how strong her daughter has become. The Industry Excellence Award ceremony should have been my moment of triumph. Instead, I kept scanning the crowd, half expecting Roslyn to materialize and create a scene. The twins noticed my distraction immediately. "Mom, you're doing that thing with your necklace again," Cora whispered, reaching over to still my fidgeting hands. We were seated at the main table, waiting for the keynote speaker to finish. "Sorry, sweetie, just nervous about the speech." The lie felt bitter on my tongue. I'd promised myself never to lie to my children. Ethan leaned in from my other side. "Bull, something's wrong. You've given dozens of speeches." His dark eyes, so like mine, narrowed. "What aren't you telling us?" Before I could respond, Jonathan appeared behind us. "Sylvia, we need to deal with the situation in the lobby." My stomach dropped. "She's here, isn't she?" "Who's here?" Ethan demanded. "Your grandmother," Jonathan replied, his usual diplomatic tone hardening. "And she's making quite a scene." Cora grabbed my arm. "Grandmother, as in—" "Stay here," I ordered, standing up. "Both of you." Of course, they didn't listen. They never did when it really mattered. They followed me and Jonathan to the hotel lobby, where Roslyn was arguing with the event security. "I have every right to see my daughter receive her award," she was saying, voice pitched to Carrie. Several guests were already watching the drama unfold. "Mum, let us handle this," Cora whispered, but I shook my head. "Roslyn," I called out, keeping my voice steady. "This is inappropriate." She turned, that familiar manipulative smile spreading across her face. "Darling, I couldn't miss your big night." Her eyes landed on the twins. "And these must be my grandchildren. How grown up you both look." Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of me. "We're not your anything. You lost that right 20 years ago. Such hostility." Roslyn pressed a hand to her chest, playing to her growing audience. "I've made mistakes, yes, but I'm here to make amends, to be part of this family again." "Family?" Cora's laugh was cold. "You abandoned our mother when she was pregnant, with twins, at 18. There were circumstances you don't understand." "Oh, we understand perfectly," Ethan cut in. "Mum told us everything. How you kicked her out because her pregnancy would embarrass you in front of your new husband's fancy friends. How you changed your number, moved away, pretended she didn't exist." Roslyn's facade cracked slightly. "That's not entirely." "And now," Cora continued, "now that she's successful, you show up wanting what? Money, recognition, a relationship." "I raised her—" "No," I interrupted, finding my voice. "You didn't raise me. You controlled me, manipulated me, and when I needed you most, you abandoned me. The only thing you taught me was how not to be a mother." The lobby had gone silent. Roslyn glanced around, realizing her audience wasn't sympathetic. "I have rights," she hissed, dropping the act. "I invested in your future, paid for your education, until I got pregnant," I reminded her. "Then you wrote me off as a lost cause. Everything I've achieved, I did despite you, not because of you." "We'll see about that." She reached into her purse, pulling out an envelope. "I have proof of my financial contributions. Perhaps your investors would be interested." Ethan snatched the envelope from her hands. "You mean these?" He started tearing it into pieces. "Guess you'll need better leverage." "Security," Jonathan called out. "Please remove this woman. And this time, ensure she doesn't return." As the guards approached, Roslyn's mask completely slipped. "You ungrateful little bitch! You think you're better than me? I made you who you are." "No," Cora said firmly, taking my hand. "She made herself who she is. And she made us who we are. You're nothing to us." I watched as they escorted Roslyn out, her threats echoing through the lobby. The twins stayed close, their presence anchoring me. "Well," Jonathan said, breaking the tension, "I believe they're about to announce the Industry Excellence Award for Innovation in Technology. Shall we?" I looked at my children, my real family. and felt a surge of pride. Actually, I need to rewrite my acceptance speech. I think I finally know exactly what I want to say. About time, Ethan grinned, draping an arm over my shoulders. Just please don't make us cry in public. No promises, I replied, heading back to the ceremony with my head held high. Roslyn might have returned to haunt me, but she just reminded me of exactly how far I'd come and who had really been by my side along the way. The morning after the award ceremony, I found myself sorting through an old storage box I hadn't opened in years. The twins sat cross-legged on my office floor, examining faded photographs and documents. "Mum, is this you?" Cora held up a creased Polaroid of a teenage girl in an oversized sweater, trying to hide a small baby bump. 18 and terrified, I confirmed, taking the photo. That was taken the day before she kicked me out. Ethan picked up a wrinkled envelope. "What's this?" "Don't," I started, but he'd already pulled out the contents, a handful of bounced checks and a handwritten note. "Don't contact me again. You made your choice." Ethan's voice shook with anger. "She wrote this to you when you were pregnant with us." A knock at the door saved me from answering. Claire entered, looking apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but Roslyn is in the building again. She somehow got past security using a visitor pass from another company." "Of course she did," I muttered. "Where is she now?" "Conference room B. Jonathan's stalling her." I stood up, straightening my blazer. "Kids, stay here." "Not happening," they said in unison. The walk to the conference room felt like marching into battle. Through the glass walls, I could see Roslyn sitting there, examining her manicure while Jonathan kept a careful distance. "I'll handle this," I said, pushing open the door. Roslyn's eyes flickered to the twins. "Family meeting? How appropriate." "What do you want?" I remained standing, the twins flanking me. "To remind you of something you seem to have forgotten." She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. "Remember this place?" The photo showed a small medical clinic. My heart stopped. "What about it?" My voice sounded distant. "That's where I took you for your first prenatal appointment, where I paid the deposit for your medical care." Her smile turned predatory. "Before you decided to ruin everything by keeping them." "You wanted me to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I gave you options," Roslyn said. "Very expensive options. Options that would have preserved your future. Instead, you chose this." She gestured vaguely at the twins. Ethan stepped forward, but Cora grabbed his arm. "Let her finish digging her grave," she whispered. "I have receipts," Roslyn continued. "Proof of every penny I invested in you. By my calculations, with interest, you owe me close to $500,000. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. "That's what this is about? Money? It's about what's fair. I sacrificed everything for you." "No," I cut her off. "You sacrificed me for everything else. Your reputation, your new marriage, your social standing." I pulled out my phone, and while we're discussing receipts, I played the recording from last night's confrontation in the hotel lobby. Her threats, her admission of attempted blackmail. "Extortion is still illegal, last time I checked," Jonathan added mildly. Roslyn's face paled. "You recorded me." "I record all potential security threats to my company," I replied. "Standard procedure. You wouldn't dare use that against your own mother." "Watch me," I leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to stay gone. If you ever try to contact me or my children again, this recording goes to every media outlet in the city. You can't—" "I can. I will. And just so we're clear?" I pulled out my checkbook, wrote quickly, and tossed it at her. "Here's $500,000. Consider every imagined debt paid. We're done." She stared at the check, then at me. "This doesn't change anything. I'm still your mother." "No," Cora said quietly. "You're just the woman who gave birth to her. There's a difference." "Security's waiting outside," Jonathan added, opening the door. Roslyn stood, clutching the check. "You'll regret this, Sylvia. The truth about your success, about where you really came from, is right here," I interrupted, putting my arms around my twins. Everything I am, everything I've built, came from choosing them, from proving you wrong. So thank you, Roslyn. Thank you for showing me exactly the kind of mother I never wanted to be. After she was gone, Ethan turned to me. Did you really just give her $500,000? I smiled. Look at the check. Cora ran to the door and came back with the discarded check. She read it and burst out laughing. What? Ethan grabbed it. Pay to the order of your conscience, amount, 0 and euros. Mom, you're savage. I learned from the best, I said, hugging them both. Now, who's hungry? I think we all deserve some comfort food after that performance. Pizza? They asked hopefully. Pizza, I agreed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about money or power. Sometimes, it's simply about showing them exactly what they threw away. We have a problem, Jonathan announced, bursting into my office 3 days later. He dropped a stack of papers on my desk. Your mother's been busy. I flipped through the documents, my stomach tightening. She's meeting with Marcus Reynolds, our biggest competitor. Not just meeting. Look at the last page. The final document showed a series of email exchanges. My hand started shaking as I read them. She's claiming she provided the initial seed money for my company. I stood up so quickly my chair rolled into the wall. That's impossible. I have every bank record, every transaction. She's fabricated quite a convincing paper trail, Jonathan said grimly. Reynolds is considering using this information for a hostile takeover attempt. Claire appeared in the doorway. Sylvia, the twins are here, and you need to see this. Ethan and Cora rushed in, Ethan clutching his laptop. Mum, she's gone public. He turned the screen toward me, showing a business news website. The headline made my blood boil. Tech CEO's success story questions. Mother claims rights to company ownership. That's not even the worst part, Cora added, scrolling down. She's giving interviews about how she sacrificed everything to support your early career. She's trying to force my hand, I said, pacing. Make me pay her off to keep quiet. Actually, came a familiar voice from the door, I'm trying to take back what's mine. Roslyn stood there, looking perfectly polished in an expensive suit. Behind her, Marcus Reynolds smiled like a shark that had just spotted blood in the water. This is private property, Jonathan stepped forward. You're trespassing. Not for long, Reynolds replied smoothly. Once these ownership documents are verified. They're forgeries, I snapped. Are they? Roslyn pulled out a yellowed envelope. Remember this, darling. The college fund I set up for you. The one you emptied to start your precious company. My heart stopped. The college fund. The one thing I'd tried to forget. That money was mine, I said carefully. You signed it over to me on my 18th birthday. Under duress, she countered, when you threatened to expose certain family secrets to your stepfather. The twins looked at me questioningly. I'd never told them this part of the story. You want to talk about secrets, Roslyn? I moved closer. Like why you really set up that fund, where that money really came from. Her smile faltered slightly. Mom? Cora touched my arm. What's going on? Your grandmother didn't set up that college fund out of maternal love, I said, never breaking eye contact with Roslyn. She set it up to hide money from her first divorce, money she embezzled from her ex-husband's company. Reynolds' shark smile disappeared. Is this true? Of course not, Roslyn laughed, but it sounded hollow. She's desperate. I have proof, I cut in. Every transaction, every transfer. I found the papers when I was cleaning out her house after she kicked me out. That's why she signed the money over to me so easily, because she knew I could prove where it came from. You're bluffing, she whispered. I walked to my desk, pulled out a thick file from the bottom drawer. I kept everything. Been waiting 20 years for you to try something like this. Reynolds backed away from Roslyn. I think we're done here. Marcus, wait. She reached for him, but he was already heading for the door. You didn't think I'd be prepared? I asked quietly. You taught me well, remember? Always keep leverage. Always have a backup plan. This isn't over, she hissed. Actually, Jonathan interjected. It is. Our lawyers are filing a defamation suit as we speak. Those false claims you made to the press, they're going to cost you. You can't prove they're false. Yes, we can, Ethan spoke up. We found your old accountant. He's very chatty these days, especially since his retirement. Rosalind's composed facade cracked completely. You ungrateful little... Security's on their way up, Claire announced from the door. Should I have them escort Mrs. Lawson out, or would she prefer to leave with her dignity intact? For a moment, Rosalind just stood there, looking older and smaller than I'd ever seen her. Then she straightened her spine, adjusted her designer bag, and turned to leave. You'll regret this, she said over her shoulder. No, I replied. I won't. But I think you might. After she left, the twins hugged me tight. That was badass, Mom, Cora whispered. Yeah, Ethan agreed. But why didn't you use this leverage before? I looked at the file in my hands, 20 years of insurance against this exact moment. Because sometimes the best revenge is waiting for your enemy to destroy themselves. Jonathan cleared his throat. Speaking of destruction, shall we discuss our counterattack? I smiled, feeling more energized than I had in days. Oh yes, let's show her exactly what happens when you try to take on this family. Got it! Cora burst into my home office, laptop in hand, Ethan right behind her. You won't believe what we found. I looked up from the legal documents I'd been reviewing. It was Saturday morning, but we'd all been working around the clock since Rosalind's latest attack. Remember how you said Rosalind remarried right after kicking you out? Ethan pulled up a chair. Well, we did some digging into her new family. And? I set aside the papers, intrigued by their excitement. She's done this before. Cora turned her laptop toward me. 3 times. The screen showed a series of news articles spanning the last 20 years. Each one featured Rosalind, under slightly different names, involved in various financial disputes. Look at the pattern, Ethan pointed. She marries wealthy men, usually with grown children. Then she somehow gains control of family assets, and suddenly there's a massive family fallout. Her current husband, Cora added, is Richard Sterling. My eyes widened. The real estate developer? The very one, Ethan grinned, and guess who's been quietly selling off his assets without his knowledge? A knock at the door interrupted us. Jonathan entered, looking unusually animated. You need to see this, he said, turning on the TV in my office. The news channel showed Richard Sterling himself, standing outside his office building, surrounded by reporters. Allegations of unauthorized property sales and misappropriated funds, he was saying. I've filed for divorce and am cooperating fully with the investigation. Holy shit, I whispered. That's not all, Jonathan said. Richard's children reached out to our lawyers. They want to talk. Within hours, my living room had turned into an impromptu war room. Richard's 3 adult children sat across from us, sharing stories that felt eerily familiar. She isolated our father, Sarah the oldest explained, convinced him we were after his money. Sound familiar? Then she started managing his finances. Michael, the middle child, added. Said she was protecting the family legacy. But you caught her, I said. Thanks to you, Lisa, the youngest, smiled. When we saw the news about her claims against your company, we started investigating, found the pattern you exposed. We're building a class action lawsuit, Sarah said. Other families have come forward. Would you be willing to testify? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Rosalind. We need to talk. One last chance to make this right. She's desperate, Ethan observed, reading over my shoulder. Good, Cora said firmly. Let's finish this. I typed back, Marriott, 1 hour, come alone. The hotel lobby was quiet when I arrived. I'd insisted on going alone, though I knew Jonathan had people watching the building. Rosalind sat in a corner, looking less polished than usual. I assume you've seen the news, I said, sitting across from her. You turned Richard against me. Her voice was bitter. Ruined everything I built. Like you tried to ruin me. I leaned forward. I have to know, was any of it ever real? Did you ever actually care about anyone besides yourself? Of course I cared, she snapped. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing but lessons in manipulation, I cut her off. And now those lessons are coming back to haunt you. What do you want? She asked tiredly. I want you to disappear, sign a confession admitting your claims about my company were false, return everything you stole from Richard, and never contact me or my children again. Or what? I pulled out my phone, showed her the evidence we'd gathered. Or I make sure every law enforcement agency in the country knows about your pattern of fraud. Every news outlet gets your story. Every family you've destroyed gets their justice. She stared at the phone, then at me. You really hate me that much? That's the thing, Roslyn. I don't hate you at all. I pity you. You could have had a real family, real relationships. Instead, you chose schemes and manipulation. And now you're alone. I can change, she whispered. No, I stood up. You can't. But you can face the consequences of your choices. The papers will be delivered tomorrow. Sign them or face the consequences. As I walked away, she called out, I did love you, you know, in my way. I turned back one last time. Your way wasn't love, Roslyn. It was control. And now you've lost both. Outside, the twins were waiting in the car, despite my instructions to stay home. Well? They asked in unison. Now we wait, I said, sliding into the back seat. But something tells me she'll sign. And then, Cora asked, I looked at my children, my real family, and smiled. Then we go back to living our best lives, because that's the greatest revenge of all. She's not going to sign, Claire announced, bursting into the conference room where we were reviewing quarterly reports. And it's worse than we thought. Jonathan pulled up a news website on the projector. My stomach dropped as I read the headline. Tech CEO's dark past, mother reveals family secrets. She's gone nuclear, Ethan said, reading over my shoulder. Look at these allegations. The article detailed supposed evidence of tax fraud, claiming I'd used illegal means to start my company. Worse, it included personal attacks about my pregnancy, suggesting I'd manipulated and blackmailed my way through those early years. She's trying to destroy everything, I whispered. Mom? Cora touched my arm. There's something else you should see. She pulled up a social media post. Roslyn had shared old photos of me as a teenager, including some from when I was pregnant. The caption read, A Mother's Sacrifice, the truth about my daughter's rise to power. The comments were brutal. People were already calling for investigations into my company. Your stock is dropping, Jonathan said quietly. Investors are getting nervous. My phone rang. Richard Sterling's daughter, Sarah. I put it on speaker. Turn on Channel 7, she said without preamble. Now. Claire grabbed the remote. There was Roslyn, sitting in a studio, tears streaming down her face. As a mother, I only wanted to protect her, she was saying, but the things she did, the ways she manipulated people, I can't stay silent anymore. That manipulative Ethan started, but I held up my hand. Wait, look behind her. In the background of the shot, barely visible, was Marcus Reynolds. He was watching the interview with a satisfied smile. They're working together, Jonathan realized. Reynolds is backing her play. Of course, I said, everything clicking into place. He wants my company. She wants revenge. Perfect partnership. What do we do? Cora asked. I stood up, straightening my jacket. We fight back. Claire, call the station. Book me for tomorrow morning's show. Jonathan, get me everything you can on Reynolds' recent business dealings. Kids, I need you to... Already on it, Ethan interrupted, typing furiously on his laptop. Found something interesting about Reynolds' recent acquisitions. They all follow a pattern similar to Roslyn's schemes. And look at this, Cora added, pulling up another document. The timing of their meetings coincides with several suspicious property transfers. My phone buzzed again, a text from Roslyn. Ready to negotiate yet? Mom? Cora looked worried. What's our play here? I smiled, feeling strangely calm. We give them exactly what they want, a public showdown. The next morning, I walked into the same studio where Roslyn had given her tearful performance. She was already there, along with Reynolds, both looking smugly confident. "Darling," Roslyn said sweetly as the makeup artist prepared us for air. "Last chance to make this right." "Funny," I replied. I was about to say the same thing. The red light came on. The host introduced us, recapping the controversy. Roslyn launched into her well-rehearsed story about my supposed misdeeds. "And what do you say to these allegations?" the host asked me. I pulled out my phone. "I say, let's listen to something interesting." I played an audio recording. Reynolds' voice. "Once we take her company, you'll get your cut. Just stick to the story." Roslyn. "What about the illegal property transfers? If those come out..." Reynolds. "They won't. Trust me. This plan is foolproof." The studio went silent. Reynolds' face turned purple. Roslyn's makeup couldn't hide her sudden pallor. "That recording," the host stammered, "is that real?" "As real as the documentation I've just sent to the SEC about Mr. Reynolds' recent business practices," I said calmly. "And as real as the evidence of my mother's involvement in multiple fraud schemes across 3 states. "You recorded us?" Reynolds sputtered. "No," I smiled. "You recorded yourselves. My tech company specializes in cybersecurity, remember? Your phones have been compromising your conversations for weeks." Roslyn stood up, shaking. "You can't..." "Security is waiting outside," I cut her off. "Along with some very interested FBI agents. Would you prefer to walk out, or should they come in?" The host was frantically signaling to the producer, but I wasn't finished. "Oh, and Mom, those photos you posted? Thank you. They showed everyone exactly what I overcame to build my success. Every comment attacking me just proved how strong I had to be." As security led them away, the host turned to me. "Would you like to make a statement?" I looked directly into the camera. "Success isn't about who gives you opportunities. It's about what you do with the challenges life throws at you. And family, real family stands by you. They don't try to tear you down for profit." The red light went off. Claire rushed in with updates about the stock price already rebounding. But all I could think about were my twins, watching from home, seeing their mother finally close this chapter of her life. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when I arrived for the hearing. 3 weeks had passed since the TV studio showdown, and now it was time to face the music, all of us. "Ms. Lawson," they called out. "Any comment on your mother's plea deal?" I kept walking, Jonathan and the twins flanking me. Inside, the courtroom was already packed. Richard Sterling and his children sat in the front row, nodding as we passed. Roslyn and Reynolds were already there, both looking considerably less polished in their prison jumpsuits. "All rise," the bailiff called out. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. I listened as the prosecutor laid out the charges: fraud, extortion, conspiracy, securities violations. The evidence we'd gathered had opened a Pandora's box of crimes spanning decades. "The defendants have agreed to plead guilty to all charges," the prosecutor announced, "in exchange for their cooperation in ongoing investigations." Roslyn turned around, her eyes finding mine. For the first time, I saw something real in them: fear. "Before I accept these pleas," the judge said, "I understand the primary victim would like to make a statement." I stood, smoothing my skirt. Cora squeezed my hand as I walked to the podium. "Your Honor," I began, 20 years ago, I was 18 and pregnant with twins when my mother threw me out. She told me I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything. Those words haunted me for years." Roslyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "But today, I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about justice, not just for me, but for every family these defendants have torn apart with their schemes." I turned to face them directly. "Mr. Reynolds, you thought you could use my mother's bitterness to steal my company. Instead, you exposed your own criminal enterprise. And Mom, Roslyn, you thought you could destroy what I built, but you forgot something important." "And what's that?" Roslyn asked, her voice barely audible. You taught me to keep receipts, I smiled. Every manipulation, every scheme, I learned from watching you. The difference is, I use those lessons to protect myself and others, not to destroy them. The judge leaned forward. What are you asking for in terms of sentencing? The maximum allowed, I said firmly. Not for revenge, but for protection. These defendants have shown they won't stop unless forced to. They've hurt too many families, destroyed too many lives. Reynolds' attorney jumped up. Your Honor, my client— Save it, the judge cut him off. I've reviewed the evidence. The plea deals stand, with maximum sentences. He turned to Roslyn and Reynolds. You'll both have plenty of time to reflect on your choices. As the bailiffs led them away, Roslyn called out, Sylvia, please. Goodbye, Mum, I said quietly. I hope you find peace. Outside, the reporters were waiting again. This time I stopped. Ms. Lawson, how do you feel about the sentencing? I felt Ethan and Cora step up beside me. Today isn't about feelings, I replied. It's about accountability, about showing that success built on destroying others will eventually crumble. And what about your mother? Will you ever forgive her? I paused, considering. Forgiveness isn't about excusing actions. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger. So yes, I forgive her. For my sake, not hers. Mum, Cora whispered, look, Richard Sterling and his children were approaching. Sarah stepped forward first. Thank you, she said simply, for helping us expose the truth. We should be thanking you, I replied. Your courage in coming forward made this possible. Richard cleared his throat. We're organizing a support group for families affected by similar situations. Would you consider speaking at our first meeting? I looked at my twins, saw them nodding encouragingly. I'd be honored. Later that evening, we sat in my living room, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and case files we no longer needed. So, Jonathan said, raising his glass, what's next for the unstoppable Lawson family? Sleep, Ethan groaned, making us laugh. Actually, I said, pulling out my laptop, I've been thinking. We've learned a lot about how vulnerable families can be to manipulation and fraud. Maybe it's time to use that knowledge. What do you mean? Cora asked. I'm thinking of starting a foundation, something to help protect families, provide resources, legal support, turn all this pain into something positive. The Phoenix Foundation, Cora suggested, because you rose from the ashes of what she did to you. We rose, I corrected, hugging them both, and we're going to help others rise too. As my family discussed plans for the foundation, I realized something profound. Roslyn had tried to write my story as a tragedy. Instead, she'd helped create a legacy of strength, resilience, and hope. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. The Phoenix Foundation's inaugural event filled the hotel ballroom with survivors and their families. As I watched Sarah Sterling wrap up her powerful speech about recovering from familial fraud, my phone buzzed with a familiar prison number. I declined the call, just as I had every week since the sentencing. Still calling? Cora asked, adjusting the foundation's banner behind the podium. Every Wednesday at 6, I replied, like clockwork. Ladies and gentlemen, Jonathan announced from the stage, please welcome our founder, Sylvia. The applause felt different this time, not the polite corporate acknowledgement I was used to, but something warmer, more personal. These people understood my journey because they'd lived their own versions of it. When my mother first reappeared in my life, I began, I thought she came to destroy everything I'd built. Instead, she showed me exactly what needed to be built next. The audience leaned forward, many nodding in recognition. We all have stories of betrayal, of family members who chose greed over love. But those stories don't define us. What defines us is what we choose to do with our pain. A movement at the back of the room caught my eye. Richard Sterling had arrived with his youngest daughter, Lisa. They were supporting an elderly woman I recognized from the case files, another of Reynolds' victims. The Phoenix Foundation isn't just about preventing fraud, I continued. It's about redefining family. Sometimes family is who we choose, who stands by us when biological bonds fail. Ethan appeared at the side of the stage, giving me a thumbs up. He'd just finished setting up our new online support network, connecting survivors across the country. Today we're announcing our legal defense fund. No one should face these battles alone. No one should have to choose between justice and bankruptcy. The doors opened again. Marcus Reynolds' ex-wife entered with their children, all of them wearing Phoenix Foundation supporter pins. But most importantly, I said, my voice growing stronger, we're here to remind everyone that your worth isn't determined by those who failed you. It's determined by how you rise, how you rebuild, and how you help others do the same. After the speech, during the reception, Claire rushed over with her tablet. You need to see this. It was a news article. Rosalind Lawson attempts prison program reform, cites personal transformation. She's teaching other inmates about recognizing manipulation patterns, Claire explained. The prison psychologist says she's making real progress. Good for her, I said, meaning it, but that chapter of my life is closed. Mom, Cora called out. The Sterling siblings want to discuss expanding the Foundation's reach. The next hour flew by in a whirlwind of conversations, plans, and connections. People shared their stories, their triumphs, their ongoing struggles. Each one reinforced why we'd created the Foundation. As the event wound down, Jonathan joined me at a quiet corner table. Quite a turnout, he said, sliding me a coffee. But you haven't checked your phone in hours. I pulled it out, 7 missed calls from the prison. She's persistent, he observed. She always was. I stared at the notification. Maybe that's what made her so dangerous. And now, I deleted the notifications. Now she's just someone who taught me what not to be. Mom? The twins approached, followed by a group of young adults, all children of fraud victims. We want to start a youth outreach program, help kids spot the warning signs early. Looking at them, my children, who'd grown into such compassionate, strong individuals, I felt a surge of pride. You know what the best revenge is? I asked Jonathan. He gestured at the room full of healing families, at my twins leading their peer support initiative, at the wall displaying our Foundation's mission statement, transform pain into power. I think you figured it out, he smiled. The last guests were leaving when Claire brought me one final message, a letter from the prison. Unlike the others, I opened this one. Sylvia, I watched your Foundation announcement on TV. For the first time, I saw you, really saw you. Not as an extension of my ambitions or a target for my resentment, but as the remarkable woman you've become despite me, not because of me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that you've succeeded in the one area I always failed. You've created something that helps people instead of hurting them. Don't respond. Don't visit. Just know that at least one good thing came from my failures. They helped you become everything I never could be. Ah. I folded the letter and slipped it into my purse. Then I joined my real family, my children, my friends, my Foundation members, as they planned the next chapter of our shared story. Not a story of revenge or resentment, but one of resurrection, of rising from the ashes stronger, wiser, and ready to light the way for others. That's the thing about phoenixes, they don't just rise, they soar.
When Margaret Collins took down her pediatrician's license from the clinic wall, she had no idea it would mark such a significant turning point in her life. Throughout her 62 years, she had saved countless children's lives. And now, the life she most wanted to save was that of her only granddaughter. "Thanks for picking me up again, Grandma." Sophie's voice from the back seat was quieter than usual. Maggie gazed at her 8-year-old granddaughter through the rearview mirror. She was wearing a long-sleeved sweater again, even though Boston's autumn wasn't that cold yet. "Of course, sweetheart. It's my pleasure." A gentle silence filled the car. This was their precious time together, twice a week. On these drives home from school, Sophie had slowly begun to open up. "Mom's been so angry lately." Though it sounded like casual conversation, alarm bells rang in Maggie's heart. With over 30 years of experience as a pediatrician, she sensed the darkness lurking behind those words. "I get so scared when I make mistakes." Sophie's voice trembled. Maggie recalled numerous cases she'd seen at the hospital, families that appeared perfect on the surface but harbored deep wounds. And day by day, her fears grew that a similar situation was unfolding within her own family. Since losing her husband John to a heart attack 2 years ago, Maggie's reason for living had been her time with her granddaughter. And now, that precious granddaughter was suffering. #best mom life, #perfect family, #loving mother. Victoria elegantly manipulated her smartphone, adding hashtags to her latest post. The screen showed her baking cookies with Sophie. Her 500,000 followers were rapidly liking this lovely mother-daughter holiday moment. That's today's post done. The moment Victoria put down her phone, her expression changed completely. "Sophie, you spilled flour on the floor again. You're absolutely useless." Victoria's sharp voice rang out as she spotted the flour on the kitchen floor. Sophie hunched her shoulders and silently began wiping it up. As a parenting influencer earning over $200,000 a year, Vicky excelled at projecting the image of a perfect mother. However, off-camera, she showed an entirely different face. "You've ruined the shoot, thanks to you." Lately, Vicky's hysterical scolding had been escalating. Her shopping sprees for luxury brands had increased, as had her nights out. The gap between her superficial perfection and reality grew wider by the day. Christopher's phone rang while he was reviewing blueprints for a major project at his architectural firm. It was his mother. "Chris, we need to talk." There was an unusual tension in Maggie's voice. "I found bruises on Sophie's arm today. She said she fell, but..." Christopher let out a deep sigh. His gentle nature had made him slow to notice the changes at home, absorbed in his work. But lately, he too had felt something was wrong. "I understand, Mom. I'm looking into it." After hanging up, Christopher opened his desk drawer. Inside was a private investigator's report. Evidence of his wife's suspicious behavior, online gambling records, and most importantly, proof of her daily verbal abuse towards Sophie. The decisive man was already considering his next move. In a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Boston, Maggie was stitching a traditional family quilt in her backyard. This Christmas would hold special meaning. As the cold autumn wind blew through, Maggie continued her needlework, deep in thought. As a doctor, as a grandmother, and above all as a human being, she had something she needed to protect. In her heart, anxiety about disrupting the superficial peace battled with her mission to save her granddaughter. 1 month until Christmas. The time that would drastically change this family's destiny was quietly but surely approaching. Thanksgiving morning brought a cold fog to Boston's suburbs. Maggie had been preparing the turkey since early morning. In the photo frame on the dining table, her husband John, who had passed away 2 years ago, smiled gently. This year especially, she felt his absence deeply. "Let me help." Sophie, wearing an apron, began peeling potatoes beside her grandmother. Her careful movements showed an unusual tension for an 8-year-old. "You're doing great, Sophie." When Maggie praised her, her granddaughter's face brightened momentarily. But the expression quickly faded as they heard the front door open. "Hello, everyone." Vicky's voice rang out. Perfect makeup and a glamorous dress, she looked as if she'd come for an Instagram photo shoot. Christopher appeared behind her, carrying large paper bags. "Sorry we're late. I had a live stream to do." Despite her apologetic words, there was arrogance in Vicky's voice. She immediately took out her smartphone and began photographing the kitchen scene. "Sophie, stand over there. Oh, that apron looks cheap. Let's change it." Vicky pulled out a luxury brand apron with the logo still visible. The price tag was still attached. "But Grandma gave me this one." Sophie's voice trembled. "Just do as I say. My followers are watching." That's when it happened. Sophie's hand slipped, and a glass fell to the floor. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the room. A moment of silence. "What have you done?" Vicky's scream filled the room. "Who did you inherit this clumsiness from?" "Certainly not from me." Those words froze Christopher and Maggie in place. The warm Thanksgiving atmosphere instantly turned ice cold. "I'm sorry." Sophie repeatedly apologized, her shoulders shaking. The sight pained Maggie's heart. "I'll clean it up." Christopher quietly stood up to get cleaning supplies. There was a sense of determination in his back. That night, Maggie couldn't sleep. In her backyard studio, she continued working on the Christmas quilt while reflecting on the day's events. The Collins family tradition passed down through generations. A quilt made with love in every stitch. This year's design held special meaning. Scattered among the blue and white fabric were small butterfly patterns. These wings of freedom patterns contained prayers for Sophie. "I never thought it would come to this," Maggie murmured while continuing her needlework. The evidence of abuse she had seen as a doctor. And now, the same thing was happening within her own family. As Christmas approached, Vicky's behavior became increasingly erratic. Her social media posting frequency increased. #PerfectMomLife, #BlessedFamily hashtags accompanied endless uploads of happy mother-daughter moments. But reality was far removed from these posts. "I'll be late tonight. I have a business meeting," Vicky would say as she left, but Christopher already knew the truth. The meetings at luxury hotels. The inappropriate relationship with a real estate client. The detective's report detailed everything. Even more serious were the financial issues. Massive online gambling debts. Maxed out credit cards. Buying and returning luxury goods for profit. The problems were more severe than expected. "Mom, I want an iPad for Christmas, Sophie said quietly one day. Of course, sweetie. Mommy will get you the perfect present. There was an unnatural brightness in Vicky's voice. That night, she went out again. New evidence was added to the envelope in Christopher's desk drawer. The clock ticked quietly toward Christmas. In Maggie's studio, the quilt was nearly complete. The emotions stitched into every inch would soon reveal all truths. Everyone knew this piece couldn't last much longer. Christmas morning brought gentle snowfall. Maggie had lit the fireplace early and prepared the living room. Under the large Christmas tree lay presents wrapped in colorful paper. In the center, a box adorned with blue and white ribbons. Inside waited the handmade quilt, passed down through generations. Merry Christmas, Mom. Christopher entered, holding Sophie's hand. Vicky appeared behind them, dressed in perfect Christmas coordination, already holding her smartphone. What a lovely morning. #Christmas morning #family time. The camera shutter sound clicked. Vicky's post already had hundreds of likes. But beneath the festive surface, everyone felt an unusual tension. Time for presents, Maggie announced. The family took turns opening gifts. Vicky showed satisfaction with the luxury watch from Christopher. However, there was something unnatural about her smile. Sophie, your turn. Vicky's voice rang higher than usual. Sophie nervously reached for the blue and white ribbon. The wrapping paper torn, the box opened. Inside was the handmade quilt Maggie had spent months creating. The butterfly patterns sparkled beautifully in the morning light. This. Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes. This isn't. Mom, you promised an iPad. The room's atmosphere froze. How dare you show such attitude? Vicky's scream echoed. She suddenly stood up and headed to the kitchen. Opening the refrigerator, she grabbed eggs. Her movements showed clear signs of instability. You let her expect an expensive present, and try to fool her with this piece of rag. Vicky, calm down. Just as Maggie tried to stop her, the egg flew. It broke on Sophie's chest, yolk dripping down her clothes. The room fell into complete silence. Ah! A low laugh. All eyes turned to Christopher. He slowly rose from the sofa. The next present is for you, Vicky. His voice carried a coldness they'd never heard before. Chris. Vicky's voice trembled. Christopher took an envelope from his suit's inner pocket. Why don't you open it? It might not be what you wanted. With a sardonic smile, Christopher placed the envelope on the table. What is this? Vicky's shaking hand reached for the envelope. From the opened envelope slid a bundle of papers. At the top danced the words, "Petition for divorce." No. There's more. Christopher took out his smartphone and began operating it. Photos from the hotel with your lover. Online gambling records. And the screen turned toward Vicky. This is footage from the camera hidden in the quilt. There, recorded were decisive moments of daily abuse towards Sophie. Lies, these are all lies. Vicky's scream echoed. But her voice already carried the tone of defeat. I am a perfect mother. My followers. Just then, the sound of approaching police sirens could be heard. I've already contacted the police and Child Protective Services. Christopher's voice remained calm. Sophie, come here. Maggie embraced her granddaughter. Through the egg-stained clothes, she could feel the small body trembling. It's all right now. Grandma will protect you. At that moment, Vicky made one last attempt at resistance. Wait, Chris. We can still work this out. She tried to rush toward her husband but tripped over her own feet. The coffee cup on the table fell, brown stains spreading across the white carpet. Like her facade of a perfect life crumbling away. I tried too hard to be the perfect mother. Vicky's voice suddenly became weak. In the social media world, I was the ideal mother. But in reality, tears ruined her perfect makeup. It was like watching a mask fall away. A knock sounded at the front door. Uniformed police officers and a Child Protective Services social worker appeared. I'll tell everything. Vicky's voice was filled with resignation. Just one thing. Sophie, I'm sorry. Whether those words were genuine remorse or another performance, no one could tell. Outside, snow continued to fall quietly. No one yet knew that this morning would mark a new beginning. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace. Under the Christmas tree lay the blue and white quilt, like a silent witness. The butterfly patterns seemed ready to take flight at any moment. The camera hidden within the fabric had served its purpose. From now on, it would become new eyes watching over this family. The sun was rising, marking the beginning of a new day. From this day forward, the Collins family story would turn to an entirely new page. While it was a sad ending, it was also the beginning of new hope. The sound of police sirens faded into the distance. The red taillights of the police car carrying Vicky disappeared into the morning mist. A heavy silence remained in the Collins family living room. We have more than enough evidence. Sarah, the Child Protective Services social worker, quietly began speaking. Christopher, your preparation was perfect. In cases like these, we often see victims unable to prove abuse due to lack of evidence, but a thick file lay spread on the table. Evidence: photos of infidelity, luxury hotel receipts, online gambling account history, and most decisively, the footage of daily abuse captured by the camera hidden in the quilt. You were so brave. Sarah gently spoke to Sophie, who was curled up in the corner of the sofa. The egg-stained clothes had been changed for a fleece pajama set made by Maggie. You know, Sophie began in a small voice. I always thought I was a bad child. That I was worthless because I couldn't do things the way Mom wanted. Those words pained the hearts of every adult in the room. Sophie. Christopher knelt before his daughter. Daddy's sorry too. I should have noticed sooner. But I promise, no one will ever hurt you again. Promise? I promise. Watching father and daughter embrace, Maggie quietly wiped away her tears. The aftermath unfolded surprisingly quickly. Vicky was charged with child abuse. Though she avoided prison time due to it being her first offense and considering the results of her psychiatric evaluation, she was placed on probation. Her social media accounts were suspended, and the mask of the perfect mother she had worn before 500,000 followers was permanently stripped away. Full custody was granted to Christopher, and a restraining order was issued against Vicky. The full extent of her debts came to light. $120,000 in online gambling losses. Fraudulent activities involving buying and returning luxury goods. It had all started from trying to maintain appearances on social media. It's hard for our generation to understand. Maggie murmured in the car after finishing a meeting with specialists. Being trapped in the perfect life on social media, losing sight of real happiness. Christopher quietly nodded in the passenger seat. But this is our new beginning. The start of our real family story. 6 months later, in early summer. A small vegetable garden had been planted in the Collins family backyard. "Grandma, the tomatoes are turning red." Sophie's voice rang out cheerfully in the sunshine. Coming to Maggie's house every weekend to grow vegetables together had become their new tradition. After 6 months of professional care, Sophie was slowly but surely regaining her smile. Her school grades began to improve, and her relationships with friends gradually got better. "Dad, look." Christopher smiled gently at Sophie as she held up the harvested tomatoes in both hands. He too had established a new rhythm as a single father. He chose smaller projects at his architectural firm, prioritizing time with his daughter. The quilt given that Christmas morning hung on the living room wall. The camera had been removed, and it now quietly watched over the family as a pure symbol of love. The butterfly patterns shone brightly, as if symbolizing their new life. "Grandma." At dusk, Sophie suddenly asked Maggie. "When I grow up, can I learn to make quilts too?" The question brought tears to Maggie's eyes. "Of course, sweetheart. It's a tradition for Collins family women." Grandmother and granddaughter embraced quietly in the sunset-lit backyard. Their wounded hearts were being stitched together with threads of love. Like making a quilt, patiently, gently, and surely. Sometimes, things need to break before they can take on a new form. Perhaps true happiness lies not in pursuing perfection, but in accepting imperfect reality and spinning hope from it. The Collins family's new story was just beginning. Not a virtual image on social media, but a real story filled with warmth, sometimes awkward but genuine love. Like the stitches sewn into the quilt, it would continue to be woven slowly but surely, one day at a time. "My daughter just passed away." "What?" The dumbfounded look on Neville's face as he stared at me standing in the doorway was seared into my mind. He seemed unable to process the sudden news that his daughter had died. "What are you talking about? Stop with these tasteless pranks." That's not funny at all. How dare he mock me while I stood there soaked from the rain? This is no lie. How could you do this? I'll handle the funeral arrangements. I'll be away from home for a while. Goodbye. Seeing my trembling body, Neville finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation and exclaimed, "No way." But his reaction seemed somehow detached, as if it was someone else's problem, which grated on my nerves. As I turned on my heel, anger welled up from deep within me. I will never forgive him. I'm going to drag him down to the depths of hell. My name is Rochelle. I'm 38 years old and work at an advertising company. My family consists of my husband Neville and our 8-year-old daughter Darla. While we weren't wealthy, we lived comfortably enough. You see, my advertising company paid well, and compared to my friends working corporate jobs, I earned quite a good salary. I never had to worry about monthly spending money and could even save for Darla's education. Even after considering living expenses and the mortgage, we had some money left over each month. Neville knew about my high salary, and perhaps it wounded his pride because a year ago, he quit his corporate job to become a freelance web developer. He said he switched to freelancing because his corporate salary had peaked, but I had my doubts about how much he could actually earn as a freelancer. Of course, I opposed when he quit his company job. I thought it would be safer to continue working at the company and receive his full retirement benefits rather than take the risk of becoming a freelancer. However, Neville insisted on becoming a freelancer, and in the end, he got his way. After becoming a freelancer, Neville worked from home every day. Maybe his salary complaints were just an excuse, and he actually just disliked dealing with the troublesome interpersonal relationships at the office. Either way, our new life began with Neville at home while I went to the office. At first, Darla seemed happy that her father was always home when she returned from school, but lately she had been looking dissatisfied. Though she didn't say it out loud, she probably felt like she was constantly being watched. Even at just 8 years old, Darla was more mature than her classmates. We were living without any major problems, but I failed to notice that cracks had started appearing from the time Neville began working from home. When Neville started working from home, I asked if he could help with the housework, even just a little. "Could you please help with cleaning and laundry, just whatever you can manage? I'll still cook the meals like before." "Huh? Why should I have to do housework?" "Well, you're home more and have more flexible time than I do. Of course, it's fine when you're tired. Just whatever you can manage." Flexible. Listen, just because I'm freelance doesn't mean I'm free. In fact, there are many difficult things. How can I possibly do all that too? What a response. Neville completely dismissed my hesitant suggestion. True, I understood what he was saying about freelancers being very busy. I knew it was more unstable and mentally taxing than being a company employee. That's exactly why I had opposed his career change. But housework isn't solely anyone's job. Especially since we had both been working up until now while I handled all the housework. I thought he could at least share some of the burden. But I'm working too, so shouldn't we split things equally? You've been managing fine on your own until now, right? don't start complaining now." Neville, convinced he was in the right, wouldn't hear me out at all. In the end, I continued handling all the housework as before. While I didn't think my husband wasn't busy with his work-from-home setup, whenever I came home late, Neville was invariably either sprawled in front of the TV or intently staring at his smartphone screen. I couldn't help but feel angry when he would look down at me and ask, "Is dinner ready?" as if it was only natural. What's more, working from home seemed to make him more aware of the garbage, floor, windows, and toilet getting dirty, and he started ordering me around every day saying, "Clean more thoroughly. If it bothers you so much, why don't you clean it yourself?" I'm human too, so sometimes I miss spots. Are you talking back to me? Clean up your own mess. Since it was our family home, I wasn't the only one making messes. Yet Neville kept spouting nonsensical arguments, and I was thoroughly exasperated. Meanwhile, Darla was quietly listening to our conversations from afar. "Hey Mom, Dad's always glued to his phone. I want us all to go out together on days off, but Dad always says no because he's on his phone." One Sunday morning, Darla came to me while I was making breakfast and said this. Apparently the night before, when Darla had told Neville she wanted to go out, he had refused while looking at his phone. "Is that so? But you're right, your dad is always looking at his phone. He's been on it since before you get home from work. Sometimes he's on phone calls too." "Phone calls?" "Yes. He talks really friendly with someone. I can always hear a woman's voice." That's. From how Darla described it, it didn't sound like Neville was talking to work contacts. While it wasn't impossible that he was talking to work colleagues, I wondered who would need such frequent phone calls with a freelancer. Since I didn't know much about that world, maybe he was delegating parts of his work to others, but something about Darla mentioning a woman's voice bothered me. Could he be having an affair? It wasn't impossible. My husband had only started working from home a few months ago, and he definitely had much more freedom with his time than when he was a company employee. I desperately tried not to let Darla see how troubled I was as I finished making breakfast. Several more months passed, marking a year since Neville had gone freelance. He still wouldn't help with any housework. What's more, he had started being away from home entire weekends. He would leave saying, "Freelancers don't get days off. I'm going to work," but on such occasions he would usually dress up more than usual and even wear accessories and cologne that he normally didn't use. While I was suspicious, I resigned myself to the fact that even if I made a fuss about an affair now, he would just smooth talk his way out of it without any evidence. Besides, even if Neville was having an affair, what should I do? While I knew intellectually that we should separate, thinking about Darla made it impossible to make such a clean break. I agonized daily over whether I had the resolve to take a father away from Darla. Such was our life when a turning point finally arrived. Monday morning, I was getting ready to head to work as usual, but Darla wasn't getting up and I was worried she would be late for school. "Darla, it's morning. You'll be late for school if you don't get up soon." When I went to Darla's room to wake her, I found her looking very weak. I rushed over and put my hand on her forehead. "You're burning up." Darla, you have a fever. I brought a thermometer and put it under her arm. She had a high fever. What should I do? I have an important meeting today and can't take off work. While I was fretting and flustered, Neville came over. What's wrong? Darla has a really high fever. I can't miss work today. Maybe we should call a helper. A helper? No need for that, I'll watch her. Just need to let her rest quietly, right? I can at least make porridge. It'll be fine. I was shocked when Neville offered to take care of feverish Darla. This was the same Neville who had left all housework and childcare to me and refused to get involved at all. I couldn't believe he would look after our sick daughter. But there was no time to discuss it, so I decided to trust Neville and leave it to him. All right then, I'll leave it to you. There's fruit in the fridge too, you can cut some up for her if she feels like eating. Got it. Relieved to get such a reassuring response from Neville, I hurriedly finished getting ready and rushed out of the house. Though I was terribly worried about Darla, getting to work on time had to be my priority right now. I jumped on the train, and by the time I reached my station near the office, the sky had darkened and rain had started falling, but I managed to make it to work. The meeting started in the afternoon as scheduled, but I couldn't get Darla off my mind. Just then, everyone became unsettled by the sound of heavy rain and strong winds shaking the building from outside. Come to think of it, hadn't the news mentioned a typhoon approaching? I hadn't properly checked the weather forecast lately since I'd been so busy, but I recalled the typhoon news had been playing repeatedly, and this morning's news had said the typhoon may make landfall tonight. Even during the meeting, everyone including myself seemed distracted by the typhoon's effects, repeatedly glancing outside. At 7 p.m., when I finally finished work and started heading home, the rain had gotten even heavier and several trains had stopped running. The train I had planned to take was significantly delayed, and the platform was overflowing with people. Worried about Darla with her high fever, I couldn't wait on the platform. I quickly left through the ticket gates to look for a taxi. There were many others waiting for taxis too, so I had to wait quite a while, but after 30 minutes I finally managed to catch one. After a 30-minute drive home, I got out of the taxi in front of my house and was stunned by the sight before me. Darla. There was Darla, collapsed in front of the entrance. I immediately picked up my soaking wet daughter. Darla, are you okay? What happened? Dad. Seeming relieved to see my face, Darla went limp with exhaustion. She still had a high fever, her body was hot despite being drenched by the rain. I turned back toward the taxi I had just gotten out of and knocked on the driver's window. Excuse me. I need another ride. Please take us to the hospital. Seeing my desperate expression and the limp Darla in my arms, the driver must have realized this was serious and opened the door saying, "Please get in." I hurriedly got into the taxi. I had him take us to the nearest hospital. Darla. During the taxi ride, I called Darla's name over and over. I felt I had to, or something terrible would happen to her. Though I desperately wanted to know why Darla had been collapsed in front of the entrance, saving her life was more important than that right now. The taxi made slow progress through the typhoon, but we finally reached the hospital. "Ma'am, please be careful on your way back too, as conditions will likely be similar," the kind driver said as he saw us off, and I carried Darla into the hospital. Though there were many patients at the hospital, the receptionist recognized Darla's condition as an emergency and got us in to see a doctor quickly. The doctor examined Darla and told me she was delirious with fever. There were no external injuries, so she should be fine once her fever came down. However, since she had likely been outside in the rain for several hours with a high fever, Darla needed to be hospitalized immediately. "I'm so sorry, Darla. Get well soon, sweetie. We'll take care of anything that comes up, so please get some rest for today, ma'am." "Thank you." After 5 hours at the hospital spent watching Darla's pain-sleeping face, a nurse came to speak to me. Though I wanted to stay by Darla's side, the nurse was right. I had come home tired from work, then this happened with Darla, and I was exhausted both physically and mentally. I should leave this to the nurses and head home for now. This was definitely Neville's fault. The proof was that Darla had mumbled, "Dad," before losing consciousness. There's no way Darla would have gone outside with such a high fever on her own, especially not during a typhoon. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't understand or forgive what Neville had done. On my way home, I contemplated what to say to Neville. If he heard Darla was safe, he might get cocky and pull something like this again. I had to absolutely prevent that. Neville needed to reflect on this incident more deeply than the ocean. And so, having made a certain decision, I returned home. When I arrived home in the rain, Neville was casually playing with his phone. When he noticed my return, he looked up suddenly and stared at me. "Hey, what happened to Darla? She was sleeping at the entrance, right? She said she was going to play outside." I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. I couldn't contain my anger at Neville's casual statement. Darla went outside on her own. When he was the one who threw her out. I clenched my fists and replied. "She just passed away." "What?" The dumbfounded look on his face as he stared at me standing there was seared into my mind. He seemed unable to process the sudden news that his daughter had died. "What are you talking about? Stop with these tasteless pranks. That's not funny at all." How dare he mock me while I stood there soaked from the rain? This is no lie. How could you do this? I'll handle the funeral arrangements. I'll be away from home for a while. Goodbye. Seeing my trembling body, Neville finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation and exclaimed, "No way." But his reaction seemed somehow detached, as if it was someone else's problem, which grated on my nerves. As I turned on my heel, anger welled up from deep within me. I will never forgive him. I'm going to drag him down to the depths of hell. I left home and headed straight for a hotel. I managed to find one with vacancies and decided to stay there for a while. Though the expense would hurt, this was no time to worry about such things. I wanted revenge on Neville. If he showed remorse and changed his ways, I might reconsider how to handle things going forward. But judging by how Neville hadn't immediately called or messaged me, I could see right through to his feelings. he couldn't care less what happened to Darla. This made me even angrier, and I finally began plotting in earnest to teach Neville a lesson. The next morning, as soon as I woke up, I headed straight to the hospital. They had contacted me to say Darla had regained consciousness. Darla, are you okay? I'm okay now. My fever's gone down. Oh, thank goodness. I hugged Darla and stroked her head. Darla giggled, feeling ticklish. After a while, I got Darla to tell me what had happened. Darla, what happened yesterday? Dad kicked me out. He said, "You're in the way, get out," and a woman came in, and they were chatting happily together. A woman? What kind of person was she? I didn't see her clearly, but she was young. She had bright red nails and wore thin high heels. What a situation. So Neville was indeed having an affair. Not only that, but he had invited his mistress over on a day his daughter had a high fever, and worse still, he had kicked his daughter out. It was completely unbelievable. I couldn't understand how anyone could do something so terrible. So that's what happened. I'm so sorry, Darla. You must have been scared. Yes. But I was happy you saved me, Mom. I cannot forgive him for putting Darla through this and trying to find happiness with his mistress. My whole body shook with anger burning up from deep within me. Oh right, Dad said he's going to invite that woman over again next Sunday. Next Sunday. That's when I'm supposed to be on the company trip. He was planning to spend a pleasant day with his mistress while I was away. I was utterly disgusted, but this cemented my resolve. Thank you. That's good to know. As I stroked Darla's back, I silently vowed to make Neville pay for what he'd done. That Sunday, I decided to return home with Darla. I contacted my company and told them I couldn't participate in the trip due to urgent family matters. After being discharged, Darla had been staying at the hotel with me. Though it was our first time back home in a while, as we reached the entrance, it already felt like someone else's house. "We're home," Darla and I called out as we entered, and sure enough, there was an unfamiliar pair of high heels in the entryway. Just as Darla had said. The thought of Neville and his mistress enjoying themselves in the back room made my skin crawl. Neville wasn't in the living room, so I headed toward the bedroom. Then I heard Neville's voice coming from inside. This worked out well, though. With Darla gone, getting divorced will be easier too. How can you say that about your own daughter? But you're right, it was lucky for me. I felt dizzy hearing them talk about Darla's death as convenient and lucky. Now I understood completely. Neville didn't have an ounce of remorse. Well then, I would simply have to confront him head-on. "Excuse me. Oh, do we have company?" The two of them were shocked, their eyes widening at the sight of Darla and me appearing in the doorway. "Why are you here? You said you had a company trip today. And why is Darla here? What's going on? Wasn't your daughter supposed to be dead?" Of course they would panic seeing Darla appear before them when they thought she was dead. I explained carefully. The death was a lie. I'm sorry. I wanted to see how you would react. I thought you might show some remorse, but instead you were happy about it. That's not normal. A lie. I knew it, you worthless liar. Give me back all the time I spent worried. I let out a heavy sigh at Neville telling such an obvious lie about being worried. Don't be ridiculous. You're the one who kicked Darla out of the house, aren't you? That's not true. Darla just. Dad kicked me out. He said I was in the way because he wanted to be with that woman. When Darla immediately spoke up with the truth, the color drained from Neville's face. You did something absolutely despicable, both as a father and as a human being. While she's fine now, she really could have died. You wanted to be with that woman so badly you'd do this to Darla. I pointed at the woman who had been staring blankly at our argument from beside Neville and shouted. Don't make it sound so bad. She's just someone from work. Work? But dear, didn't you quit your job and become a freelancer? Neville's attempt to cover up with a careless lie ironically proved that the woman was his mistress. Well, I didn't really need to ask you about that anyway. Here's the evidence of your affair. Private investigators are amazing, aren't they? They gathered all this evidence in just 1 week. I thrust a large envelope in Neville's face. Yes, after hearing about Neville's affair from Darla, I had launched a full investigation. But I never expected evidence to surface so quickly. Neville wasn't very good at covering his tracks. Neville nervously opened the envelope and took out the contents, dropping the stack of incriminating photos on the floor. This is unfair. How does it feel to back someone into a corner like this? Do you enjoy doing this to people? I couldn't understand Neville's mentality at all, trying to make me the villain even though he was entirely to blame for being cornered and criticized. I pulled out the divorce papers I had kept in my bag and thrust them at Neville. Unfair? Who's really being unfair here? I see no value in staying with someone who can't even tell right from wrong. Let's get divorced. Neville's eyes went wide as he stared at the divorce papers. If he had wanted to be with his mistress all along, he should quietly accept the divorce papers. Oh, and of course after we separate, you'll be paying alimony and child support. And you'll be paying damages too. Be prepared. I turned to look at his mistress. What? Me? I never heard about this. You don't know. You destroyed a family, so you need to take responsibility. But I don't have any money. The woman frantically ran her fingers through her hair. Both Darla and I watched her coldly. Though Darla was still a child, she seemed to somewhat understand what damages meant, and she gripped my hand tightly. If you don't have money, take out a loan or whatever you need to do. You two love each other, right? Surely you can overcome this much hardship together. Don't ever show your faces to me and Darla again. You can have this house. Good luck with the mortgage payments. Hey! Wait! Though Neville called out, "Wait," I ignored him and pulled Darla along with me. While this child would lose her father, I had no regrets. Never again would I let Darla be put in danger. Darla, from now on let's do our best together. Yes. Darla smiled more happily than I expected, which put me at ease. I took Darla to my parents' house, and we stayed there for a while. My parents were absolutely furious about Neville's affair and how badly he had treated Darla. They looked ready to storm over and punch him. I managed to stop them, averting that crisis. Stay here as long as you like. Both my mother and father were very welcoming, and Darla was happy to be with her beloved grandparents. I was relieved that things seemed okay for now. Meanwhile, I had a lawyer request alimony and child support from Neville, and successfully got him to pay it all in one lump sum. Of course, I squeezed proper damages out of his mistress too. Since I doubted Neville had that much in savings, he probably took out loans. On top of that, he still had to pay the remaining mortgage, so Neville must be incredibly tight on money now. There was a colleague at my company who had gone to high school with Neville, and they told me about how Neville was doing recently. Apparently, after all that, he and his mistress had broken up. It seems Neville had bragged to his mistress about having money, so when she found out that wasn't true, she said, "This isn't what you told me," and promptly ended things. Well, it couldn't be helped since Neville's income had been cut in half compared to his company employee days. Now he was frantically working various part-time jobs on top of his freelance work. Having lost his wife, daughter, and even his mistress, Neville would spend the rest of his life struggling to pay back his debts. It was all his own doing. I hope he suffers and regrets what he did. Mom. Today at school, I made presents for Grandma and Grandpa. Oh really? Well then, let's give them to them together later. Okay. Seeing Darla so lively even without Neville made me feel happy. From now on, I would keep moving forward at my own pace together with Darla. I can't go to the Christmas party anymore. My daughter went to a Christmas party held by her friend. My daughter went out looking excited, but just 30 minutes later she came back crying. Huh? Why? Look inside my luggage. You'll know when you see it. I obeyed her words and was surprised to see inside my daughter's bag. How did this happen? Grandma. After that, I heard a story from my daughter that made me feel murderous toward my mother-in-law for the first time. My mother-in-law has always been verbally abusive towards me and my daughter, but I never imagined she would stoop to such levels. I really can't forgive this. My name is Audrey. I am a part-time housewife who lives with my husband and daughter. From the beginning of our marriage, I was troubled by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who lived nearby. My mother-in-law was very discriminatory towards her grandchildren, and only cared for my sister-in-law's child who was born around the same time, her niece Alice, and never seemed to love my daughter Celeste. Sometimes when I meet my mother-in-law at family events, my mother-in-law smiles at her niece but ignores my daughter. My daughter was hurt by the attitude of my mother-in-law, who ignored her greetings. When my husband says, "Mom, please say hi to Celeste too," she reluctantly greets my daughter, but only then. She was just talking to her niece and wouldn't even make eye contact with my daughter. Since my father-in-law passed away 2 years ago, my mother-in-law's attitude towards me and my daughter has gotten even worse. Soon after, my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law decided to live together, but they moved to a place close to my house. If she doesn't like me, she should just leave me alone, but my mother-in-law sometimes comes to my house without an appointment whenever she finds free time. Your room looks pretty bare, can't you make it more cute? Is curry for dinner tonight? How can you make such a shoddy dish? My mother-in-law was constantly criticizing my housework, and my stress was steadily accumulating. Additionally, my mother-in-law also complains about my daughter, comparing her to her niece. Your daughter isn't cute. Alice is extremely cute. Alice is good at piano lessons, and I can't find anything special about your daughter in comparison. If criticisms are directed towards me, I may endure them, but I cannot tolerate my daughter being criticized. Don't make fun of my daughter, she's your grandchild too. When I protested, my mother-in-law laughed and said, "Don't worry, she looks like you and doesn't look like my son. She may actually be another man's child." Huh. Even if it's just a joke, it's outrageous that someone would say something like that to me. That night, when my husband came home and told him what my mother-in-law had told her, my husband became furious with my mother-in-law. He immediately called my mother-in-law and told her, "Never come to my house again." Perhaps because of this fear, my mother-in-law stopped coming to our house, but soon another problem arose. A few months later, my daughter and niece were promoted to the same class. After a while, my daughter started telling me and my husband, "I don't want to go to school," with a pained look on her face. Why? When I asked my daughter, she started talking, saying, "Alice." Apparently, every time my daughter came to school, the niece was yelling abuse at my daughter. "Celeste, aren't you a bit on the chubby side? Maybe you should consider going on a diet. Celeste, what are you drawing? You're so bad I can't understand. Celeste, you're slow, aren't you? You might want to skip the sports day since you'll just be a hindrance." Because the niece constantly criticizes my daughter like that, my daughter doesn't want to attend the school where the niece is. That's what you were going through. I immediately contacted my sister-in-law, who is the mother of the niece, and told her to stop harassing my daughter. That's just what Celeste is saying, there's no proof. So Celeste lied. But my daughter isn't one to lie like that. I protested desperately, but my sister-in-law just laughed. Even if it's true, your daughter being unfashionable is a fact, right? It's too uncool to complain when told the truth. Huh. I was so angry that I couldn't say anything because something so terrible was said to me. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law said, "Is that all there is to talk about? See you later," and she hung up. One day, a week had passed without the problem being resolved. My daughter decided to go to a Christmas party held by her friend. I wonder if she'll be pleased with my Christmas present. As she said this, my daughter put a Christmas present to give to her friend in her large bag. Seeing my daughter's excited expression, I felt relieved, thinking, she hasn't seemed lively lately, so it's good to see her having fun. Soon, my daughter grabbed her bag and headed out to the Christmas party. I hope today will be a happy day for my daughter. That's what I thought, But just 30 minutes later, my daughter came home crying. I can't go to the Christmas party anymore. I was surprised to hear her sobbing as she spoke. Huh? Why? Look inside your luggage. You'll know when you see it. Following her words, I looked inside my daughter's bag and was surprised. The Christmas present inside was soaked with brown liquid. How did this happen? Grandma. Afterwards, I heard a story from my daughter that made me feel murderous toward my mother-in-law for the first time. After leaving my house, my daughter happened to meet my mother-in-law. Normally my mother-in-law would ignore my daughter in such situations, but today she smiled and talked to my daughter. It's a big bag. Does it have any presents in it? Yes. When my daughter nodded in confusion, my mother-in-law said, "Show me what's inside." When my daughter reluctantly showed her what was inside her bag, my mother-in-law's eyes lit up. Well, it's cute. Inside the bag was a body pillow with a character that was popular these days. My daughter's friend is a big fan of the character, so she chose this one that she thought she would enjoy. Is this a present for Alice? Are you coming to visit her now? At those words, my daughter tilted her head in confusion. Oh, no, it's not for her. I'm giving this to another friend. And what do you mean by visit? At those words, my mother-in-law's face changed from a smile to anger. Alice has had a fever since yesterday. Really? But it's been winter break since yesterday, so I haven't heard anything. However, my mother-in-law did not listen to my daughter's words and yelled at her. Don't tell me you're not coming to visit Alice and you're giving presents to other kids instead. The next moment, my mother-in-law opened her daughter's bag and poured the tea in. What are you doing? When my daughter looked in her bag in a panic, the body pillow was stained brown with tea. It's your fault, bye. Apparently, my mother-in-law said that and left. I can't give presents to my friends like this. Saying that, my daughter was crying a lot. I gently stroked her head. Don't worry, you can go buy another present now and give it to her. Afterwards, I called my daughter's friend's house and explained the situation. I told him that she would be late for the Christmas party. Good, now I can give Mary a present. My daughter laughed as if she was relieved. Afterward, my daughter went to the Christmas party carrying the pillow she had bought. I felt relieved when I saw her, and immediately called my mother-in-law to protest. I heard from my daughter. What's going on? Spilling tea on my daughter's belongings. In response to my inquiry, my mother-in-law became defiant. She's the one at fault here. Alice has been suffering from a fever since yesterday, yet she didn't bother to come and visit. Giving presents to another child instead is just unbelievable. I haven't heard anything like that, and regardless of whose present it is, spilling tea on it makes me question your judgment more than anything. Oh yes, I did something bad. Now that I think about it, I should have given that pillow to Alice instead of pouring it tea. Don't be silly. Please apologize to my daughter for what you did. I yelled at her, but my mother-in-law said, "You're making too much noise, I'll hang up now," and hung up the phone. A few hours later, my daughter came home and was in a good mood. I was late for the Christmas party, but everyone welcomed me warmly and they were happy to receive the presents. I was relieved, but that didn't stop my anger towards my mother-in-law. When my husband came home from work that night and told him what she had done today, my husband became furious. I never thought my mother would do something so outrageous. The next day, my husband stormed into his parents' house and yelled at them. "Mom! What a terrible thing you did to Celeste." My sister-in-law's husband, Luke, tilted his head in wonder. "What's wrong?" "Yes, yesterday my mother." When my husband explained the situation in detail. "I'm really sorry about that." Luke apologized even though it wasn't his fault. However, the mother-in-law in question remained defiant. "Why do I have to apologize? Don't you think you did something pitiful to Alice?" She just said that and glared at my husband with dissatisfaction. My sister-in-law, who was next to her, also said, "That's right. Even though it's Christmas, all Alice could do was sleep." Seeing the two of them like that, my husband shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I can't feel sorry for my niece. She did something terrible to my daughter." When Luke heard those words, he asked, "Huh? What do you mean?" My husband told him what my daughter usually says to the niece. Upon hearing the content, Luke looked shocked and said, "I never thought Alice would do something like that." He seems quite shocked by what his daughter did. Seeing his expression, my husband nodded. "Yes, so please warn her not to do that again. I don't want to see my daughter suffer any longer." After saying that, my husband left his parents' home. The next day, Luke and the niece came to our house. "Celeste, I'm sorry for saying the horrible things I said before." Saying that, the niece apologized to my daughter. Luke also apologized to our family. I told my daughter not to do this again, and it seemed like my wife was the culprit. According to Luke, the niece was often told by my sister-in-law, "Celeste is a lesser person than you, and you should teach her that." When the niece asked her why, my sister-in-law apparently said, "You and Celeste are cousins, so people will inevitably compare you, and if by any chance Celeste is thought to be better than you, your position will be lost." It seems the frightened niece tried to reassure herself by mocking my daughter. However, last night, Luke scolded her, saying, "Trying to maintain your position with such actions is something only a foolish person would do." It seems this woke up my niece. She's done terrible things without considering Celeste's feelings. With those words, my daughter placed her hands on the bowed shoulders of her cousin. "If you apologize, that's fine. Let's make up." "Celeste." The niece looked at my daughter with tearful eyes. Luke then handed us an envelope with money in it and said, "This is our apology for ruining your gift. I'm sorry that the mother-in-law did something so terrible." Luke said and apologized to us again. "Yes, I heard from my father. I'm sorry that grandmother ruined your present." With that, my niece apologized to us as well. It was at that time. "Huh? Why are you apologizing to these guys? That's right. There's no need for Alice to apologize to them. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law came into our house. It seems like he was chasing the niece and Luke. Luke sighs at the two of them. Well, we're the one who did the bad thing. When Luke said this, my sister-in-law just said, "Huh? Why? It's not our fault." My niece said to my sister-in-law, "Mom, it's my fault after all. It's my fault for making fun of Celeste, who didn't do anything, and soiling her luggage." My sister-in-law laughed out loud at her niece's words. It's natural that the girl is secretive and not cute, so she can't help it. My sister-in-law said and pointed at my daughter. That's right, it's only natural that a girl who isn't cute will be made fun of. My husband and I were furious at the way my sister-in-law and her mother-in-law made fun of my daughter in front of her. My husband, in particular, shouted, "What?" and tried to rush towards them, but before he could do so, the niece loudly interrupted him. I've always thought that my mother and grandmother are weird. You make fun of people without any problem. Even I feel weird when I'm with them, so I don't want to be with you anymore. Saying that, the niece turned her back on my sister-in-law and mother-in-law. My sister-in-law said, "What did you say? How dare you speak to your mother like that?" and attempted to slap the niece. Luke grabbed her hand. Enough is enough. I've had it with you. I'm considering divorce. Divorce? Luke, are you kidding? My sister-in-law turns pale and my mother-in-law panics. Without paying attention to them, Luke bowed, apologized to us and said, "I'm sorry for causing such a disturbance," and then took the niece and left. After that, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law ran after her in a panic. It's pathetic that these people are family members. When my sister-in-law and mother-in-law disappeared, my husband muttered a little. Later, Luke told me, "I have decided to divorce my wife." According to Luke's story, soon after living with the mother-in-law, Luke became troubled by the splurges of the mother-in-law and sister-in-law. It seems that the father-in-law had left him a large amount of property, and the two took advantage of this and spent a large amount of money on branded goods and entertainment. Even if Luke warns them, they won't change the way they spend his money. Luke had no choice but to manage the family's money, but my sister-in-law and mother-in-law began withdrawing money from Luke's account and stealing money from his wallet. Luke was fed up with them, but he still thought that his daughter needed a mother and grandmother. However, she apparently decided to divorce after the niece started to dislike them. "I'll take Alice in. She wants that." At Luke's words, I nodded and said, "Yes, that's better." After that, my sister-in-law and Luke divorced. Luke returned to his parents' home, taking the niece with him. At that time, the niece had to transfer schools, and a short time later my daughter received a letter from the niece. "I'm really sorry for everything. I'm enjoying my time at my new school. I hope you're also doing well, too." When my daughter saw the content, she was relieved and said, "I'm glad Alice is doing well." However, after a while, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law came into our house again. "Please. I won't be able to live like this. Please let me live here." It seems that after Luke left, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law immediately used the father-in-law's inheritance and became penniless. She is currently making a living by selling luxury goods and brand name items from her home, but it is only a temporary measure, so she would like some help. No, I refuse. I absolutely won't let you live here. The two of them screamed at my husband's words. Huh? What are you thinking? We are your blood-related family. Why does it matter what happens to us? My husband is stunned by my sister-in-law's words. Although we are blood-related family members, I don't want to live with such unreasonable people. My family consists only of my wife and daughter. What did you say? My sister-in-law screamed and tried to grab my husband, but he quickly tore her hand away. I don't think of you as family anymore. Don't ever appear in front of us again. My husband kicked them out. Afterwards, my husband told me, if they come while I'm gone, feel free to kick them out. You can also call the police. There are many stories about husbands being unable to go against their blood-related family members, but my husband drove them away with a firm attitude. I felt that such a husband was reliable. A few days later, the two, struggling to make ends meet, tried to shoplift from a supermarket at the same time, but were caught. When my husband was contacted by someone to take over the couple, he refused to take them in, saying, "I don't know, I will never go." I don't know what happened to my mother-in-law and sister-in-law after that. There are rumors that they have sold their house and are living in an old apartment, but that has nothing to do with us anymore. My wife and my daughter are still happily living together as a family of 3. Despite everything that happened, I'm grateful to you for still being my husband and wife. That's what my husband told me the other day. Yes, you've always put us first, haven't you? We're the ones who should be grateful. Hearing my words, my husband said, "Audrey," with a tearful but happy expression on his face. I would like to continue living happily with my husband and daughter without. In the misty morning of a quiet suburban Chicago neighborhood, Rebecca Anderson held her daughter Sophie's hand as she kissed her husband David goodbye on their doorstep. The white walls and deep green shutters of their 2-story home gleamed in the gentle spring sunlight that illuminated Sophie's golden hair. The maple trees lining the street were beginning to sprout new buds, announcing the arrival of spring. Will you be working late again today? Yes, we've got a deadline coming up for a new project. But don't worry, Margaret said she'll pick up Sophie. Your mother is such a blessing to us. This was how mornings typically began at the Anderson household. Margaret, David's mother, devotedly supported the working couple. She helped with childcare 3 times a week and often brought homemade casseroles on weekends. On the surface, they seemed to maintain ideal family bonds. However, while expressing her gratitude, Rebecca couldn't help but notice the clouded expressions that occasionally crossed her mother-in-law's face. Just the other day, Margaret had worn a peculiar look while stroking Sophie's golden hair, quite different from her usual serene expression after Sunday church services. Yesterday too, she had kept glancing at Sophie while sipping her after-dinner coffee. Sophie doesn't look anything like David, Margaret had mumbled, almost to herself. The words felt like a tiny thorn in Rebecca's heart. Indeed, Sophie's blue eyes and blonde hair were traits not seen in her husband's brown-haired family line. They hadn't told Margaret, a conservative Christian, about using a sperm bank after their fertility treatments. Lately, her mother-in-law's scrutinizing looks had become increasingly uncomfortable. Working as a pediatrician at Chicago General Hospital for 5 years, Rebecca had chosen this path after her own struggles with infertility. Through her daily practice, she had come to understand that families come in many forms. This belief had only grown stronger since marrying David 6 years ago. At the hospital, she encountered various types of families: adoptive parents, foster families, those with children conceived through artificial insemination. Their smiles were bound by pure love, regardless of blood ties. "Let's look at David's childhood photos again," Margaret would say, opening old albums during weekend family dinners. Rebecca wondered if she was imagining the trembling in Margaret's hands as she turned the pages. Lately, these album viewings had become more frequent. There seemed to be a deep sadness in her mother-in-law's eyes as she gazed at David's childhood pictures. And every March 15th, without fail, Margaret would spend the day alone at church. Rebecca found meaning in several peculiarities: the conspicuous lack of Margaret's own young adult photos, her avoidance of topics about adoption or foster care. As a former high school teacher who had touched many young lives, why did Margaret specifically avoid these subjects? Sometimes she would even leave the room if adoption was merely mentioned. When Rebecca would ask, "Margaret, when was this photo taken?" she would only receive vague responses like, "Oh, yes." Sometimes, Rebecca would catch her staring out the window with tears in her eyes, as if carrying a heavy secret. David had been acting strange lately too. Always the dedicated analyst at a major investment firm, he had been complaining of chest pains and secretly making doctor's appointments. His separate filing of insurance documents was concerning. Late at night, his face illuminated by the computer screen showed signs of deep fatigue. He must just be tired. Rebecca tried to convince herself, but her medical instincts couldn't ignore the warning signs. There could be arrhythmia or more serious cardiac issues. The bells of St. Mary's Church, within walking distance of their home, gently shook the morning air. Dew glistened in their well-maintained garden, carrying the scent of roses. Margaret, living just a 5-minute drive away, never missed her thrice-weekly childcare duties. Sunday church services, monthly family dinners, everything appeared to be the perfect picture of family life. 2-year-old Sophie was outgoing, offering her adorable smile to everyone. She was popular at daycare, with teachers remarking on her exceptional cheerfulness. Her smile was indeed a source of comfort. When they had decided to pursue fertility treatment, David couldn't bring himself to tell anyone, even his mother, about his azoospermia. Instead, his pride had led him to become even more devoted to family life, always spending weekends with Sophie. "Bye-bye, Papa." Sophie's voice brightened the morning air. David lifted his daughter high, spinning her around. However, Rebecca didn't miss his slight grimace after the movement. This gesture transformed her worry into certainty. No one could have imagined what was about to unfold. The peaceful morning routine carried a precarious fragility, like walking on thin ice. The light breaking through the morning mist cast an ominous glow, as if foreshadowing the destiny approaching this family. The next morning, Rebecca's phone rang in the darkness of their bedroom, where the digital clock showed 5 a.m. David, who should have been sleeping beside her, was nowhere to be seen. "Rebecca, my chest." Her husband's voice from downstairs was strained and broken. Her medical instincts kicked in instantly as she rushed down the stairs. David lay on the study floor, covered in cold sweat, his face pale and breathing shallow, showing clear signs of chest pain. "David, stay with me." Rebecca quickly checked his pulse while calling for an ambulance. Arrhythmia. Though a pediatrician, she couldn't ignore these symptoms. Next, she called Margaret. "Mother, could you come right away? David is." "I understand. I'll be right there." Margaret's voice lacked its usual composure. Perhaps she sensed the gravity of the early morning call. "Sophie needs." "Don't worry. You stay with David." Within 10 minutes, Margaret arrived, wearing only a coat over her pajamas. By then, the ambulance sirens were drawing near. "We'll need the insurance documents. They should be in the blue folder in the study." "Margaret, please." While paramedics began treating David, Rebecca asked her mother-in-law to prepare the necessary paperwork. Margaret hurried to the study. In the pre-dawn dimness, she opened drawers with trembling hands. Blue folder, blue folder. As she frantically searched, an old envelope slipped from the bottom drawer. Papers scattered across the floor. Then, words jumped out at Margaret. "Sperm donor agreement." Time seemed to freeze as Margaret stood motionless. With shaking hands, she picked up the papers. There, in cold print, lay her son and daughter-in-law's secret. "No, this can't be true." Her whisper carried a painful resonance that reached no one. The documents revealed everything: David's azoospermia diagnosis, sperm bank contracts, the whole truth. Just then, Sophie's crying came from upstairs. The commotion must have woken her. Margaret rose with mechanical movements, stuffing the scattered papers into her coat pocket. "Grandma's coming." As she climbed the stairs, Margaret's mind was in turmoil. Opening Sophie's door, she found her young granddaughter sitting anxiously on her bed. Her golden hair shimmered in the morning light, tears glistening in her blue eyes. "It's all right, sweetheart. Your daddy will be better soon." Despite these reassuring words, Margaret's heart was in upheaval. Looking out the window, she saw the garbage truck turning onto their street, a reliable presence every Tuesday morning. In the entryway, paramedics were loading David onto a stretcher. Rebecca held her husband's hand, watching them prepare for transport. Beside her, Margaret held Sophie with a determined expression. "Rebecca, you go with the ambulance. I'll get Sophie ready and follow later." But there was an unfamiliar coldness in her voice. Rebecca noticed something off about her mother-in-law for a moment, but her concern for David left no room for deeper contemplation. "Thank you." The ambulance sirens started again as they drove off toward the hospital. Margaret remained standing with Sophie, staring down the street. The rising sun cast long shadows across the suburban landscape. The garbage truck steadily approached their house. A fierce emotion burned in Margaret's eyes. The documents in her coat pocket felt heavy, seeming to reinforce her resolve. "You've been deceiving my son all this time." Her whisper disappeared into the morning mist like an unheard prayer. The garbage truck's heavy engine rumbled through the quiet suburban street. Margaret held Sophie, dressed in a white dress, as she stepped out of the house. Some scattered papers lifted in the morning breeze. "This child isn't David's." As these words left her lips, intense anger surged through Margaret's heart. The betrayal of her son. Happiness built on lies. And the existence of her granddaughter before her. Had it all been false? "You've been deceiving my son all this time." Margaret's cry cut through the quiet morning air. Her hands trembled as she held Sophie high. The startled young girl wore a worried expression. At that moment, medical documents caught the wind and swirled upward. A donor information sheet fluttered down like a butterfly, landing at Margaret's feet. Unconsciously, she bent to pick it up. The information there caught her eye. Donor number: DN 1985035. Date of birth: March 15, 1985. Place of birth: St. Mary's Hospital. Blood type: AB. Physical characteristics: blue eyes, blonde hair. Margaret's hand froze. March 15th, the day she always secluded herself in church. And St. Mary's Hospital, where she, at 17, had given birth to a baby boy as an unwed mother. No, it can't be. Memories came flooding back vividly. That rainy morning of March 15, 1985. Still a teenager, she had surrendered the child to an institution, carrying a secret she could tell no one. The pressure from her parents and church. The stigma of being an unwed mother. At such a young age, she had neither the confidence nor strength to raise the child. Later, she became a teacher. While involved in her students' lives, she constantly thought about the child she had given up. Every March 15th was that child's birthday. In her prayers, she continued to wish for that child's happiness. And now, the documents before her revealed a truth that seemed far beyond coincidence. The sperm donor's birth date and place aligned perfectly with her secret. Tears welled up as she gazed at Sophie. Golden hair. Blue eyes. These were the same features her surrendered baby boy had possessed. Margaret's body began to shake. "Grandma." Sophie's worried voice brought Margaret back to reality. Looking back, she saw Rebecca running toward them in her black suit, having kicked off her high heels, her face desperate. "Margaret, please. Stop. She's your granddaughter." That cry carried the pure love of a mother. The morning sun reflected off the wet road, making Rebecca's tears sparkle. In Margaret's heart, past and present collided. The child she had given up. The possibility that this child had grown up to become a sperm donor, and through a twist of fate, had created her granddaughter. It seemed like divine providence, albeit with cruel irony. Reading further into the documents, she found detailed physical characteristics and family history of the donor. Under parental information, mother, teacher, father, unknown. And childhood photos that unmistakably showed the face of the child she had given up. Events raced through Margaret's mind like a film reel. The joy of learning about Sophie's birth. The familiar feeling when she first saw those blue eyes. The mysterious connection she felt holding her granddaughter during weekly church services. Everything was beginning to make sense. And then, a new emotion welled up in her heart. Not anger or betrayal, but deep affection and a sense of atonement. The life she had been forced to give up 35 years ago had found its way back to her in this unexpected way. "Grandma, I'm scared." Sophie's trembling voice struck Margaret's heart. She held her granddaughter tighter, this time with a resolve to never let go. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." These tearful words, were they meant for Sophie, for the child she had given up 35 years ago, or for Rebecca who had hidden the truth? The morning sun climbed higher, brightly illuminating the suburban landscape. Scattered dewdrops sparkled like diamonds, as if the long-hidden truth was now shining in the light. The garbage truck's engine sound had faded into the distance. The documents at Margaret's feet were no longer evidence of betrayal, but proof of a miracle. "Rebecca, I have something I need to tell you." Margaret's voice had lost its coldness. It now carried the weight of a truth held for 35 years, spoken with a mother's trembling voice. New morning light filled the street. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital's ICU, a heavy atmosphere filled the corridor with its antiseptic scent. David, who had just completed surgery, was still under anesthesia. Rebecca, Margaret, and Sophie sat on hard chairs in the waiting room. The surgery was successful. "His heart condition is stable." At the doctor's report, Rebecca let out a deep sigh. However, she intuitively understood that surviving this crisis meant facing an even greater truth. Margaret, gently stroking sleeping Sophie's golden hair on her lap, quietly began to speak. "There's something I need to tell you." Her voice carried the weight of a secret kept for 35 years. "In the spring of 1985, I was only 17. Raised in a conservative home, I fell in love with a man, someone my parents would never have accepted." Margaret's voice trembled. Rebecca silently took her hand. "Then I became pregnant. My parents were furious, and the church community turned cold. I had no choice but to surrender the baby to an institution. On March 15th, I gave birth to a boy at St. Mary's Hospital." Rebecca's eyes widened. The date and place matched those on the documents they'd found earlier. Everything was connecting. Every March 15th, when I secluded myself in church, it was his birthday. In my prayers, I continued to wish for his happiness. Large tears fell from Margaret's eyes. And this morning, when I found those documents, to think that the child I gave up would become a sperm donor, and through such a twist of fate, bring Sophie into our lives. Her voice caught. Rebecca embraced Margaret's shoulders. "Mother, we should have told you the truth sooner. About David's infertility, about our decision to use a sperm bank. No, I'm the one who should apologize for how I acted. Just then, Sophie awoke. Her blue eyes looked curiously at both of them. Margaret held her granddaughter tightly. Sophie, I'm so sorry I scared you. At that moment, a nurse approached. David has regained consciousness. Family members may enter now. In the hospital room, David managed a weak smile. He reached out to Sophie with an arm connected to IVs and heart monitors. Papa. Sophie tried to rush forward, but Rebecca gently held her back. Careful, sweetie. Papa's still hurting. Margaret took a deep breath as she looked at her son's face. David, there's something I need to tell you. And she began to share the truth from 35 years ago. About the child she had at 17. The agony of giving him up to an institution. And finding the sperm bank documents this morning. David's expression changed from surprise to confusion, and gradually to understanding. So that's why you always went to church on March 15th. Yes. While raising you, I was always thinking about that other child. Sunlight streaming through the hospital window gently enveloped the family. Mom, I need to apologize too. I should have told you sooner about my infertility and using the sperm bank. No, you did nothing wrong. Instead, to think that my connection to life would return to me in such a way. Margaret's voice broke. Rebecca took both her husband's and mother-in-law's hands. Our family isn't just bound by blood. We're connected by love and understanding. Yes. Margaret smiled. Sometimes God guides us in the most unexpected ways. Sophie cuddled up to David in his hospital bed. The 4-needle glinted as his arms gently embraced her. Papa, does it still hurt? No, I'm okay now. And I'm going to spend more time with our family from now on. Outside the window, spring breeze rustled young leaves. The bells of St. Mary's Church could be faintly heard. 1 month later, David returned to work. His heart surgery was successful, and his condition remained stable with regular checkups and medication. He adjusted his work pace to prioritize family time. Now, every March 15th is celebrated by the whole family. It has become a special day to commemorate the reunion with a surrendered life and confirm their new family bonds. When Rebecca encounters couples struggling with infertility at the hospital, she now shares her own experience with quiet conviction that love, not blood ties, creates a family. And Sophie continues to grow with her cheerful disposition. Her blue eyes and golden hair have become proof of the family's miracle. Her innocent smile seems to herald the beginning of this family's new story. Every Sunday at church, Margaret offers heartfelt prayers. No longer prayers of sadness for a lost life, but prayers of gratitude for the miracle given and wishes for her family's happiness. In the garden of their white house, beautiful roses bloom again this year. A new life grows, wrapped in genuine love. Perhaps this is the continuation of a small miracle story, connected across 35 years